Welcome to Evoke Therapy Program's broadcast. I'm Dr. Brad Reedy. Today is Thursday, September 8th, 2022. Tonight is a format where we take live questions from the audience. You can always submit questions, topics, conversations that you want to have with me to webinar at evoketherapy.com. Those come in during the week, and then after that, we go right into the live questions. Before I get into the broadcast this evening, I just want to again announce our new offering. We filled up the first class. We want to limit the class. We're doing, for the first time ever, we're doing an all-day online parent workshop led by me, Dr. Brad Reedy. We're going to do it over Zoom. It's not going to be like a lecture like these broadcasts, but it's going to be more of a dialogue with some exercises and some breakouts. So we filled up the first class. Now we've opened up a second date. December 2nd is our second date. It'll be 9:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. Mountain Time with 1 hour break for lunch. Any questions, if you want to find out more, contact intensives at evoketherapy.com. I also want to just spend a minute because I know a lot of people tune out of the podcast version of this as I go to the upcoming announcement. So before I begin tonight's broadcast, I want to emphasize the value of our Finding You workshop. As I talked about on Tuesday, we believe at Evoke, we believe very, very strongly that the basis of all relationships is the relationship that we have with ourselves, the awareness that we have with ourselves. In fact, attachment research proves over and over again across culture, socioeconomic status, that the number one predictor of a parent's ability to provide a secure connection, to provide resiliency for the child, is through a secure attachment with their child. And the number one predictor of a parent's ability to provide a secure attachment is how much sense they've made out of their own early life experiences. So if you're thinking about relationships with your children, parenting your children, co-parenting issues, marriage issues, anything that's going on in your life, I firmly, strongly recommend Finding You. Our next in-person option is October 5th through 9th. You can contact intensives at evoketherapy.com. We have an online option that is half the price and half the length. It comes in two parts. And the next offering for our online option is November 11th through 13th. And we're also closing in on finalizing our final enrollment for Returning to You. If you've been to an intensive program before and you want to come back to reconnect, I will be running Returning to You October 12th through 16th. So take advantage of that when and if you can. Now, we're having a little bit of technical challenges this evening, but I'm going to try to read the questions off of my phone, see how that goes this evening. And let me get into the first question right away. Here's how it reads. Somebody wrote in and said, my son attended Evoke for 12 weeks and then a residential treatment center for 9 months. He returned home in the spring. We front-loaded lots of resources for him and did everything in our power to ensure he felt loved, supported while maintaining our boundaries. But when things got tough with making healthy friendships, integrating with his school community, and adjusting to home life, he chose to leave home because he wanted the freedoms of an adult and wanted to spend time with those unhealthy friends. Recently, he reached out wanting to come home immediately. He apologized, said he was being kicked out of his friend's home. We did not agree to him coming home immediately. We agreed to start the conversation. As we start to work on a plan, I really don't want to micromanage his life. My initial thoughts are to stop controlling who he spends time with while maintaining a boundary around who spends time in our home. If he continues to meet his agreements and responsibilities, treats us respectfully, and continues in therapy, I would agree to let him make the decision with who he spends his free time with. This is a really difficult choice for me because of how unhealthy these friends are. What are your thoughts on setting restrictions on your child's friendships when your child is struggling with emerging personality disorders and is very impressionable? Do you recommend giving up on that battle or holding strong? Well, I find that one of the most difficult behaviors to manage in children is to manage who their friends are. I I think you gave words to the feeling that I have and the way I feel about this question. And yes, I'll admit I've given up on that as a father, and I've given up on that as a therapist. It becomes far too unmanageable for parents, caregivers to manage friendships. So managing behaviors, managing who's in your home for sure, all the things that you can clearly I would say almost easily control or manage or supervise, I would invite you to lean into that because otherwise you're going to have to be playing detective and cops and robbers with your children. And I just think that that takes up so much of our energy and time, and we really start to manage. It leads us down that slippery slope of trying to control things that we can't control. So I would pay more attention to observable relationship boundaries, participation in family activities, whether he's being kind or appropriate or respectful. I would pay more attention to those things. I have one additional thought on top of this. I want to say this while respecting all of my children's confidentiality. Um, my children going through their teen years have struggled in various ways, some more severely and overtly than others. Um, and what I'm reminded of, even as of late, what brings me back to a place of compassion is that they're doing the best that they can, even if it doesn't look like it on the surface. Part of Evoke's model, which is really just, in my opinion, the root of psychology, is that every behavior has a meaning, makes sense in a certain context. And so rather than trying to manage them hanging around the negative friends, we start to ask questions like, why are they attracted to these friends? What's so appealing to these friends? Maybe they find acceptance and belonging. Maybe they don't get criticized or get constructive feedback a lot. Maybe the ticket for entry into the membership of that group is a low bar that reduces their anxiety. So I think as we talk about problem behaviors, it's really important, especially around friends. We think about, what is it serving them? What's the benefit of it? And lastly, I'll just say this. You'll notice this tonight, especially for those of you that might be new to our process. I don't give a lot of advice. I don't tell you what to do specifically. I don't lay it out for you. I don't really think that's parenting work. And I know that sells to folks sometimes, but I really have found in my career that that's not really an effective way of managing. It's more about, again, like I said at the beginning with the Finding You workshop, about doing your own work, finding yourself, finding out what your values are. I read a quote on social media yesterday and reshared it that said, once we answer the question of who am I, the answer to the question, what should I do, becomes more clear to us. That's the whole thesis of the journey of the heroic parent, is that we're asking the wrong questions when we ask, what should I do? I don't want to punish or shame people for asking that because, again, that gets you into the therapy session and into the discussion. But I want to say this passionately to you all. The questions in life, I don't think, are what should we do? I think the questions are, what am I okay with? What am I comfortable with? What's my boundary? What's my limit? What am I willing to do in this circumstance, given that that's what my core values are? Out of that work comes the decision. It's why it doesn't work for therapists to tell you what to do, because if they skip over it when they do that, when they answer that question, they skip over the real question, which is, who are you? What's your relationship to the child? What's your relationship to the child's problems? Are you participating in it inadvertently? So I know it would be so much more satisfying, especially to parents that are new to this parent education at Evoke, for me to give specific directives about what you should and shouldn't do. But that's not really a good long-term selection, it's a choice. And you'll remain, um, you won't become an expert on your own life. You'll have to constantly go and find experts, because once the equation shifts just a small percentage, you'll have to go back to the expert. There's a great quote by James Hollis. Actually, he's quoting Carl Jung, as a matter of fact. And he says, today's answer becomes tomorrow's constraints. What was right for us in the morning is no longer true for us in the afternoon. What he's trying to teach us is that we're evolving. There's no generic solution or technique that solves these problems. It's a sensibility, a way of being. I know these sound like abstract words, and they are, but it's really important to understand that that's the basis of the work. And remember, attachment research shows it clearly. The best thing that we can do for our children is to provide a secure attachment. And the number one predictor of our ability to do that is how much of our own work that we've done. And I have found in my experience no exceptions to those principles. So I hope that helps. And I'm always sorry when I can't answer a question in the exact manner, in the exact way that it's asked. All right. Reading off of my texts from my moderator this evening. When we brought our son home from a residential therapy program, we held a hard boundary around substance abuse. We tested him weekly. He never tested positive. Then he left our home for a while and now he wants to come back. One of our concerns with allowing him to come home around substance use and exposing our younger daughter to substances. He claims that he hasn't been using substances, but he has lied before. My thought is to ask him to do a hair follicle test prior to him coming home to ensure we don't need to do any sort of detox or additional treatment prior to coming home. If the test comes out clean, we will only test. We will only test if we suspect drug use. If it shows significant heavy drug use, we explore treatment options prior to coming home. If we see moderate substance use, we do periodic drug tests administered by his treatment team. What have you seen to be most effective in these scenarios? Any recommendation? Do you believe in assuming the best or the worst in these situations? Great questions. Let me start off with hair follicle tests. They're not as reliable as the folks who market them tell you that they are. I understand the science and how it's supposed to work. Uh, I've had absolutely sporadic success with the accuracy of hair follicle tests. I just want to tell you that. Ironically or interestingly, maybe better said, the most effective drug test is a urinalysis. Now, there are ways that people can go about trying to fake those. The test will sometimes show if it's been altered. There's a control, usually a control button on a multi-panel test that will tell you if it's been altered in some way. And the other thing is that you can, if there's a trust scenario, you can follow your child into the bathroom and stand behind them while they pee in the cup. It would take a great deal of effort for them to pour some urine that would be the wrong temperature, by the way, or to pour some other substance in there that would alter or in their minds cleanse the drug test. So just to give you that insight about the hair follicle test and urine test is some background. Having said that, I think all of the things you're doing are well within your rights. In terms of being skeptical, I think it's appropriate to be skeptical if there's a history of lying. I cannot say this too emphatically. This next point that I'm going to make. If a child is making improvements in their mental health, if they're on a healing path, a wellness path, or a recovery path, they will absolutely give space for your skepticism. They will actually in part own it because they've lied. If they get defensive about your skepticism, they haven't fully surrendered and accepted their own contribution to the dynamic. So sometimes I think I sound too skeptical, too pessimistic, but I'm okay being inviting you to adopt a healthy amount of skepticism for your child and to do whatever you need to do to ensure that you're getting the results, the accurate results that you're looking for in this process. And again, I would encourage urine more than I would the other tests. At least in my experience, 25 years of doing this, that's what I found to be more effective. I found false negatives, false positives from hair follicle tests when compared to actual facts that we've known about and confirmed by the tests so many times. Even though the sales folks that teach hair follicle tests and the science that they cite sounds really, really impressive, I just haven't found it to be effective or consistent. All right. Next question reads, oh, there's a quote that I posted on social media and somebody asked a question. I told them I would address it during this podcast. The quote that I shared said this. It's by James Hollis. We do not serve our children, our friends and our partners, our society by living partial lives. and being secretly depressed and resentful. We serve the world by finding what feeds us and, having been fed, then share our gift with others. Somebody wrote the question in response to my share: where can I learn more about this? Having lived with my neuroses for decades, trying to get rid of it, but also benefiting professionally from the statement rings incredibly true. Um, the difficult part of this process is that your life's work, when you ask a question like, what's too much compassion towards self? When do I know whether I'm being too rigid, too reactive, or too flexible, too accommodating, right? All of those types of questions. My answer to those questions is that's your life's work. Your life's work is to figure out those answers, because, folks, nobody else can answer them for you. You get to decide if you like chocolate shakes. You get to decide if you like to live in snow or heat. You get to decide if you want to work a job where you work with lots of people, or you want to work in front of a screen and be far away from people. The list, of course, is infinite. You get to decide, and there's I think what's happening for a lot of us is we're looking for right answers because we grew up in households and in a culture where everything had a right answer. And in our perspective at Evoke, that's not the task to find the right answer, but the task is to find you. And what Dr. Hollis is saying is nobody's benefited by you being a victim or a martyr to the situation. The job is to find yourself, to feed yourself, to not live a small life. I said this the other night. The Dalai Lama gets so much credit. Folks like him get so much credit for being compassionate toward every person, every type of person. But remember this: their self care is nearly perfected. They don't compromise their self care or their meditation because it's a convenient for you to do. They are selfishly, adamantly committed to self care. Then, having been fed, they then go out into the world and visit prisoners on death row, showing an infinite amount of compassion toward them. I've said it before. Somebody who practices compassion, like the Buddhists, it's hard to tell whether they're talking to their best friend or a prisoner convicted of heinous crimes, because the compassion flows from them. But the start of it is the self care that they've done beforehand. And if they find themselves lacking in compassion, they don't blame it on the person, saying, well, this person's ridiculous or out of hand or gone too far. They will say and act and behave in a way to say, I need to retreat to my practice, to my meditation. You know how weight loss and weight gain can be, unless there's something specific about your physiology, is about calories in and calories out, right? There's more to it than that, but basically the amount of calories that you're burning and the amount of calories that you're taking in. Mental health is the same way too. It's about energy in and energy out. If you're spending 60 hours at work, you're going to be short with your family when you get home. If you spend a 12-hour day like me running an intensive and then adding on to it 2 or 3 private clients in the evening, what do I have to give? Whenever somebody in my family runs an intensive, whether it's me, my wife, my daughter, her boyfriend, when somebody's facilitating an intensive at Evoke and we get together in the evening for dinner, everybody else in the room knows that person has been holding pain and trauma all day just by being quiet and listening. And we all know to give them a little bit of extra space. And they know, we all know when we're that person. Look, I have very specific needs this evening. There's some things I don't want to talk about, some things I can't talk about, and some things I'm willing to talk about. But my patience is thin, right? Because we can sense, we know that that's what it's about. When we struggle with our spouses, with our children, we're called to self-care. We're called to this larger life, as Dr. Jung says. And when people worry about becoming too selfish, too self-centered, my answer is absolutely, you're going to struggle with that. You're going to walk across and over the line back and forth, because the job of our life is to figure out who we are and to be that person. And it's only from that place that we can truly love, because then it's not about being good or right or a good dad or a good wife or a good friend. It's about what you have to give. And that's really what love is. It's about having enough to give to somebody else. So you have to get what you have to get. You have to feel comfortable with it. That's the definition or the source of our boundaries. Not trying to control or manipulate other people towards our end, even our children. And remember, when they're struggling, I'm not saying this so that you sacrifice your boundaries, but more to invite a kind of a compassion. They're trying to figure it out too. And if we can remember that, we can remind ourselves of that. If we can feel that in our bodies and our hearts, that energy will flow from us. Even if we get impatient sometimes and snap, we'll come back and apologize, because we know that the struggling child, the one that is the hardest to love, is the one who needs the most. That is why, mom and dad, that is why you have to do your work. Because if you have a child that's struggling with mental health or substance use issues, you need more resources. You need more energy in. Even if you had other children where the old way of parenting worked for them, this child's needs more, needs something different. So that's why we encourage you to go out, find it in groups, find it in psychotherapy, find it in the podcast, the broadcast, the support groups, all the services that we provide. Not because we think you're uniquely pathologically destructive to children, but because you need more energy coming in. You need a place to vent, to complain, where you can just be heard and not judge and not given pat answers. I can't even remember the question, but that's my answer to the question, whatever it was. Thank you for sending it in. I think I got a little bit off track. Somebody writes, "Hi, Brad. Thanks for the webinars and podcasts. I'm a huge fan. My question is tonight is this. When I tell people about my 19-year-old son's struggles with depression and addiction, they sometimes express," I can actually read this one off the screen. "When I tell people about my 19-year-old son's struggles with depression and addiction, they sometimes express intense anger at my ex-spouse, who also is a recovering addict of many years. I am sometimes at a loss of knowing how to respond to this. My relationship with my ex was very toxic, and our breakup was very painful, but I don't blame him for my son's addiction. He did not cause it. I've been in Al Anon for 3 years and I'm well versed on the three C's. I didn't cause it, I can't cure it, and I can't control it. So I usually just say something about how they share the same genetic predisposition, or say what a terrible disease it is, or try to tap into the compassion, but I don't respond to their anger. Actually, I don't feel a need to defend my ex against his criticism. I'm wondering if you have any other ideas about how to respond or to cope better with other people's comments, which can be hurtful and troubling." It's a great question. I mean, my first response is that the people that are criticizing, it's not very fun to criticize when you come to an awareness of yourself. You know, when you realize and get into a relationship with your horrible, rotten self, as I like to call it, it's really hard to get really uppity about anybody else's mental health issues. And folks, again, some of this stuff is hard for the newer folks, but mental health and is indicated by how much we know that we're dented and bruised and imperfect. Not with a heavy dose of shame and guilt and self reproach. It's not that. In fact, those things get in the way of knowing yourself. So I guess my thought is you're doing all that you can. It's you might not be. I guess you could set a boundary with those folks and say, I'm really not open to that. I really can't hold that. You could even say to folks when children complain to one parent about the co-parent, I often say it's okay to say I can't hear that. I'm not the best person to talk to. It triggers. I might leak or react. I have my own relationship. One of the reasons why families need external help during a grief experience, a loss experience, a death experience is because everybody has their own individual relationship, their own pathway through the grief. Everybody has their own relationship with that co-parent. Every child has some identification with that parent. So if we just heap derision on the co-parent who may have been toxic, there's a part of the child that identifies with that parent. So in some small way, we're attacking them. You remember this. Children with toxic and abusive parents don't grow up hating the parent all the time. They grow up hating themselves. So while people might think it's just not very interesting to be critical of people's mental health issues when you've done your own work. People who do their own work don't spend a lot of time talking about, they might spend the time in a very safe container venting about pain or frustration or anger or sadness or hurt to somebody. That's very different. But just to casually criticize and talk about somebody's toxicity, people that do their work don't do that. It's not interesting. And if they do, if one does do that and the context is wrong, meaning the other person on the receiving end of that share is not in a place where they want to hold it or can hold it, people respond to that with respect. I just want all of you to hear this. You don't have to listen to everybody in your life, no matter what they say, to be a good friend, a good spouse, a good co parent, a good parent. That's not the job. Remember the job. The job is to be you. And if you're overwhelmed or triggered or put off by something or exhausted by something or triggered by something, you have the psychological right, the spiritual right to say, I can't talk about this right now, or I'm not the best person. When my children talk about somebody in my life, whether it be my wife or my ex-wife, I'll listen when I can. And I'll take space when I can't. That's my responsibility. All right. There was another pre-submit question that I wanted to get to, I think. Let me pull it up. This is the night of informal Q&A. It was another question that somebody wrote. Oh, I know what it was. Here it is. Oh, I posted something the other day. This is another question to another post. I posted something the other day that said this. Just give me 1 second. Okay, here it is. I finally got to it. I posted, instead of trying to get rid of your neuroses, you can try to make friends with it and see what it wants. Thinking you can get rid of it will lead you to delusion and denial. Then somebody responded with this response. Where can I learn more about this? Having lived with my neuroses for decades, trying to get rid of it, but also benefiting professionally from its statement rings incredibly true. Riding the bear, but how to avoid getting mauled. And that's the question that I answered by saying it is our job to figure out how to deal with that. I was doing an exercise with my family just the other night where I was pretending to sit with various aspects of my various neuroses. One was about body image. One was about being productive, right? One was about not being worthy. And I would talk to them. I was pretending to sit at a dinner table and say, where did this come from? Where did you come from? Where did you learn this? What do you need from me? What are you trying to protect? And I was just doing a little playful exercise because, again, these are the kind of things that psychologists and therapists do when they're just sitting around chatting at night as a family. But I'm trying to demonstrate this different kind of relationship. If you're trying to get rid of your mental health issues, listen to this, folks. If you're trying to get rid of them, before you understand what they're asking of you, you will most likely fall into delusion and denial because the instinct to get rid of it is the problem in the first place. The reason that the symptom appeared is because there was some unmet need in the context, something that couldn't get met. And so it went underground and came up as the symptom. So just trying to get rid of the symptom is just more of the same. Instead, we listen to what, as James Hollis says, we listen to what the soul is asking of us. What is this symptom protecting? What got hurt? What's lost? We understand it. If we try to rid ourselves of it, we will. See, here's the thing: we'll fall into the fantasy that you can rid yourselves of it. When the fact of the matter is, for all of us, we're going to struggle with this crap for our lifetime. We'll get better at it and we'll make improvements at it, but it will still be a theme. When under stress, we'll resort back to an old behavior, an old way of coping, an old style, an old pattern. That's all mental illness is. It's a pattern of coping that becomes ingrained, right? We create a rut in the road and we kind of fall into it. So the opposite is to make friends with it, to stop being at war with yourself, to know that the psyche, the soul is the word for psyche in Greek. That's the same word. Psyche is soul in Greek. It doesn't refer to a ghost-like embodiment that we have. It refers to all of us, the genuine, authentic, deepest parts of ourselves, the part that connects to poetry and art and music in ways that are hard to communicate rationally. Right? That's soul. It's the deep, wise parts of us. The soul is trying to speak to us, to ask us for what it needs. It's trying to teach us something. So our job is to make friends with it. When you make friends with it, you can apologize easily. Accountability comes easily. Don't you want your kids to be able to do that? To own up to their mistakes? When I'm thinking about treatment, I was talking to somebody this morning. I had made a referral of a family member to a program, a distant family member to a program, and they asked for just some information. And I said, I'm going to tell you something that's very, very general, and I could say about every client, but specific to this woman, I said, I just want her to see that she has mental health issues. If she can see that, we're halfway home. So as I look on this list of people here that are in attendance tonight, that's the goal. To learn to love your horrible, rotten self, to learn to make peace with yourself. Don't try to get better or fix yourself. Don't try to eradicate the mental illness. You'll end up being unbearable to those around you. Mental health is in large part accepting your fallibility and living with it and sitting with it. Fantasizing that you've arrived or you've transcended it, that's mental illness. And you'll recognize it because the wise mystics in the world, they don't talk about how good they are. In the West, there's a little bit of that. In America, we have a little bit of that, but those people usually get exposed at some point. But from the East, and when we talk about the wise people that have taught us for centuries, you'll recognize them because they're constantly talking about their own fallibility. So your life's work is to figure that out. Yes, as Brene Brown said in her first most famous TED Talk, a spiritual crisis looks a hell of a lot like an emotional breakdown because it is. And they're the same thing. A midlife crisis is messy and even messier the more in denial somebody is. And when you shift out of the old context that you were raised in, from trying to figure out the right thing to do and the right way to be and to be good, all of that nonsense that ensured your failure in the world, instead of just being human, like somebody like Baba Ram Dass would teach, or Thich Nhat Hanh, the Buddhist monk, or Gandhi, when you realize it's about loving your imperfect, fallible human self, it's so easy to be with you. It's so less judgmental, so much less rage and anger because you're taking care of yourself. All the shoulds and the shouldn'ts fall away and then they turn into can and can'ts. I can come with you tonight, support you, or I can't. You don't even ask questions that have the word should in them. What should I do? Because you realize that that never made sense in the first place. Like Friedrich Nietzsche said, to grow up and to become who we are, he called it killing the dragon of should and turning into a baby. We have to do battle with the dragon of should and shouldn't. And the great fear that we've all been indoctrinated into is that if we let go of should and shouldn't, that the world is going to be hedonism and chaos and selfishness and just this anarchy. That's what we've been told. And we were told that the shoulds and the goods and the rights and the wrongs and the guilts and the shame would keep us all under control. It's a lie. It's nonsense. And psychology shows it. My own life has shown it to me. And again, when we first awaken to it, we'll make mistakes. We'll cross lines. And the more in denial we have been, the more messy it will be. But on the other side of that is love and compassion and peace and empathy and authenticity and courage and insight and serenity, as opposed to fear, guilt, shame, anger, anxiety. And so we try to spend as much time as we can around people who have done their work, who can love our horrible rotten self. I had a client this week tell me that she just loves to talk to friends where she can say the unspeakable things that you're not supposed to say, and because they've done their own work, they've been through hell also, they just listen. And you're all recognizing that, right? Because you're moving from dinner parties where everybody talked about their child going to USC, right? Or the new job that their child got. You're moving away from those circles, those groups, to groups talking about this is hard. Sometimes I want to give up and run away or quit. Sometimes I feel hopeless. Sometimes I hate my spouse or my child or myself. And if the person on the other side of that relationship, that dialogue has done their work, they won't tell you what's what and what you should do and what the answer and you should meditate and they'll say, tell me about it. I'm with you. And then you found your people. But we're so afraid to leave our old contexts because of these unconscious obligations, as Freud calls it, these hidden and buried shoulds buried in our bodies, shoulds, that we stay in contexts that punish us, that keep us trapped. And we don't understand why we're not experiencing greater peace and serenity. So, with the technical difficulties, it looks like I don't have any other questions. Don, are there any other questions that you can pass on to me, or is that no more questions? All right. Sorry for the technical difficulties this evening, folks. I hope it was helpful and not too discombobulated. Somebody writes, so grateful for your podcast and the entire Evoke staff. We just returned from visiting our son in the wilderness at Evoke. This was a transformational experience for our family, especially helping us to disrupt our entrenched family dynamic. I'm curious about what themes arise in the second half of wilderness. Have you ever considered there being a typical second phase of wilderness post family visit? Curious to hear your thoughts. The second half starts being less exciting, less dynamic. The first half of wilderness is a rush, is newness, is a big shift, right? Tectonic shifts with mountain ranges and valleys being created, right? That's the first half. Great ahas, great realizations, great examples of people coming to themselves. The second half is less dynamic. There's often regression. We love at Evoke, we love regression. We love for it to get boring because that's more like real life. The first half or three quarters can be really, really exciting often for everybody. But I'm not sure that that's as representative of real life. I used to, back in a previous life, I ran marathons and I did a couple of Ironman triathlons. For those of you who don't know, an Ironman triathlon is 2.4-mile swim followed by a 112-mile bike ride and a 26-mile run. So it's a significant commitment. But what I learned was the race day was easy, relatively speaking. I mean, it was hard, challenging, but it was exciting. There was adrenaline. There was a sense of community and belonging. It was just wonderful. Some of the happiest moments of my life have been race days with marathons and Ironmans. The hard part is Tuesday morning when it's cold at 5 a.m. and drizzling rain, and you have to go run a track workout at the local high school. Or when you're tired at the end of the day and you have to go do a swim. Or every Saturday for about 6 months when you have to ride 100 miles and run 10 afterwards. That's the hard part of the race. Somebody told me a long time ago that those family visits created kind of an anticlimactic experience for the graduation. And at first I was defensive about it because I believed in the visits and I didn't want to hear that there was something bad about them. And then I realized that's a good thing because life is not climactic. So what I would say is I think it starts to feel a little bit less exciting, a little bit more mundane. There is often regression, and that's where we get to kind of meet the child where life is, how life is, right? It's a Tuesday morning at 5 a.m. in the drizzling rain. It's not the race day when all of your friends and family are celebrating your years of work. So hang in there. You're doing great work. All right. All right, folks. My books, The Journey of the Heroic Parent and The Audacity to Be You, are available on Amazon and Audible. I narrated The Audacity to Be You. We have support groups for current and alumni families. September 15th is the next offering, 6:30 p.m. We have once a month alumni only meetings for more people that have been in it a little bit longer. September 27th is the next offering. September 13th is the next offering for our intensives alumni meeting. You come, you join a Zoom call, you share, the therapist facilitates, gives you a little lesson at the end. Contact Malia at evoketherapy.com for more information. We have coaches to provide virtual coaching, think life coaching, parent coaching, marriage coaching. These therapists are all trained in the attachment evoke model, and they provide virtual coaching all over the world. We have pursuit trips between 3 and 30 days for adults and families. Think sober fun or reconnecting to your work in a safe and supportive environment. Custom design in terms of length or activities. We ask all current parents to go to 612-step support groups just to experiment with them. Any combination of alanon.org, coda.org, familiesanonymous.org, or adultchildren.org. You can also go to refugerecovery.org or nami.org for local classes and resources in your area. All of the podcasts are available on Spotify or your favorite podcast app. You can also just search Finding You, an Evoke Therapy podcast, or go to soundcloud.com on your computer. You can also watch the the video version with the slides on Evoke's YouTube channel. You can find Evoke Therapy programs and Dr. Brad Reedy me on Twitter and Instagram using the handle at Evoke Therapy and at Dr. Brad Reedy. You can find the Intensives program, the Evoke Intensives program, on Instagram using the handle at Evoke Therapy Intensives. And on Facebook, you can find us by searching Evoke Therapy programs or Evoke Therapy Intensives. We also have blogs each week added to the Evoke blog page. If you want to give back to people that can't afford treatment or therapy, the charitable partners that we have partnered with are choosementalhealth.org, sky'sthelimitfund.org, or evokefamilyfoundation.org. My next broadcast will be September 14th. I believe that's next Wednesday, I believe. Yes, next Wednesday. How to handle it when your child turns 18 in the wilderness, which I think will also be applicable if you're talking about issues with a young adult that's at home. We'll talk about using leverage, what leverage is appropriate, healthy to use, what kind of leverage might be more toxic, when to use leverage versus invitation. We'll talk about all those sorts of things. September 14th at 6:30 p.m. Mountain Time. All right, folks, thank you for your patience through the technical difficulties this evening. For and on behalf of the people that love you and that you love, thank you for being willing to do your work and showing up here to these broadcasts. Have a great evening. I'll talk to you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.